Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. So, couple things. First, apologies for not posting a video last week. I was incredibly busy. Yep, turns out I actually do have a life. Wow. But hey, I figured I owe you something particularly special this week as a result. So, we're just gonna marathon code. And, okay, the other thing I wanted to say is I literally just got done recording this very video the first time. Although, when I tested the playback after I was done, turns out the music was too loud. Basically, half the video, it was really hard to make out my voice. So, what I did was I'm like, okay, alright, I'm gonna take a bath, which is what I did. I rarely take baths, but this is like one of those times where like I was pretty much struggling between should I make a video, should I not? So I kind of like had Obi-Wan sitting on one shoulder being like, hey, you should do the right thing, make a video, and then I had like a demon sitting on the other shoulder being like, no, Patrick, get on with your life. But you know what? I'm doing this for you guys, so I'm going to repeat the programming marathon. And so without further ado, let's get straight to it. Okay, so open up your project, Dungeon Crawl. Oh yeah. Okay. So, if you remember from last time, basically we just have this project. Well, 3 projects. One of them is the main project. And then there's the console implementation of the game. And there's the monogame implementation of the game. And what I want to tell you is we're going to use the hold on. Yeah, we're going to use the Dungeons and Dragons rulebook, which, if you look at it, is 114 freaking pages long. Basic rules, 114 pages long. And you know, I grew up with Dungeons and Dragons, so I'm kind of an enthusiast. So I'm gonna implement as many rules as I can. Not all rules, but you know, I want to get really in depth with this and just have much of a blast as I can. I encourage you to basically make the game you want to make. So if you don't want to go super in depth, you can just do like half the things I'm doing and get by just fine. Or if you really want to make this like personal, you can even change the rules. You could use Dungeons and Dragons 3.5, or you could do Dungeons and Dragons Advanced, or whatever the original thing was. But I figured the way I could piss the least amount of people off was doing Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm actually more of a 3.5 guy, but yeah. So it took like a day of research to actually understand where the differences of the rules lie. So it's similar in a lot of ways, but there's also some differences to 3.5. Yeah. So primarily what we're going to be doing today is setting something up called attribute components. And I'll explain what that is to you in a second. And we're going to use those attribute components to basically build up all the attributes of a player character. So we're going to at least do the first few steps here, like choose a race, choose a class, and determine ability scores. We're going to do those three things mostly. I think maybe... Actually, no, we're not going to choose a class today. That's too much. We're just going to do a little bit of choose a race and determine ability scores. Yeah, because there's a lot to do, okay? Like I said, the rulebook is 114 pages long. Alright, so attribute components. Let's open up our good old Microsoft Paint, our friend. So, the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to make everything in the game a game object. Okay. This particular game object that I'm drawing is going to be the player. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have components for the game object. So this will be an attribute component, and it will be maybe the hit points or something similar to that. Okay. And we're going to have multiple attribute components that are kind of attached to the game object. Like so. Okay, and you know, maybe this isn't HP. Doesn't make sense to have multiple HP components. Maybe this is something more like the strength. Or this is charisma, etc. Now, the game object will have all these. Okay, but this code that we write for each of these components can be reused on other components. So say we had another game object that was... Okay, I can't make the boxes big. But let's just say this is game object enemy. Okay. We're going to reuse all this code for the enemy. Bing, bang, boom, bop, pow. Okay, that's the plan. I actually have a video on this. The very first video I did was on component-based architecture. And that's what we're going to do today. But before we do that, I'm going to jump into what any typical college professor would tell you to do. Okay? So, and I said typical because I feel like 99% of the professors I know would tell you to do this. So if you're going to create a player, they would say, okay, how about you make the player class? And then they would say, how about you make a property for hit points? Okay. Hold on, turn off Visual Assist. It's an int. How about make property for strength? Okay. How about make a okay, you get the idea. They would tell you to do it this way. And you could do it that way. You could make a game that way. That's kind of the old school way of doing things. But I say that's a load of horse crap. Say that with bitter emphasis. It's a bunch of horse crap. Because when it comes down to it, if you have a rule book that's 114 pages long, you're going to want to do lots of things like query all of the, I don't know, what do you call them? Attributes, strength attributes, or no? Are they called attributes? No, ability scores. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah. What if you wanted to just go through all the ability scores and just list them all out iteratively? Well, you just can't do it iteratively, because you'd have to go through and say, you know, console.writeLine strength, console.writeLine charisma, console.writeLine this, console.writeLine that. And then let's say you have an enemy class that has all the same things, but maybe not all the same things. Maybe it has some different things. Well, then you're gonna have problems, because I assume what you would do in that case is, okay, well then player inherits from a character object, and then character object has all these things, and then the player has different things, and the enemy has that things. But the thing is, you lose kind of the flexibility that you need, and you're going to get some pretty tight coupling between the player and the enemy. And yes, I'm using that word, coupling. Ooh. So I'm just trying to tell you, you could do this, but bad idea, okay? Halfway through production, you're going to regret it. Hardcore. So I'm going to delete the player class. Instead, I'm going to add an attribute component class. So just class to the main project. And lo and behold, we'll call it attribute component. Kablamo. Okay, so we're gonna make it public so that we can access this class from other projects. We're gonna mark it abstract because it's abstract. Okay, that's a horrible explanation. Okay, how about this? An abstract concept is something like a mammal. And something like a human, dog, or cat is a concrete concept. So, concrete versus abstract. A good test for is this abstract or not is, can you make an instance of it? Yes or no? So, can you have a mammal that is just a mammal and nothing else? The answer is no. You can't do that. It has, like, okay, a human or a cat or dog can be a mammal. Like, they are a mammal, but you just can't have a mammal all by itself. There's no such animal as a mammal. I wonder what a mammal would look like if, like a mammal animal would look like if it were such a concrete thing. But anyways, yeah, so what we'll do is we'll create an attribute component which defines kind of like an abstract concept, and we can make child classes that will kind of branch off of that. Okay, so attribute component, literally the only thing I really want to add to attribute component for the time being is maybe a component name. I think that would be very helpful. So yeah, just some sort of string that says like, hey, is this attribute component, like, what is it? Is it the name? Is it the strength modifier thing? Or ability, yeah, strength, ability score, stuff like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a public string name property that has just a normal getter, which is public, but a private setter. And what that'll do is that will make it so that we can't change the name from outside this class. We have to change it inside this class. And so we're going to create a constructor, which will be called when we construct a new attribute. And we're going to ask for a component name. Actually, just to be extremely explicit, I'm going to call this component name. Alright? So, in the constructor, all I want to do is just pass in the component name that we asked for on construction. So anytime you construct a new attribute component, you're going to have to give it the component name. And once you do, then it'll just set this property. to be that component name. Okay, pretty straightforward here. And that's done. We're done with attribute component. All right. So next, what I want you to do is add a game object class. So this one will be game object. And it's going to be public again, and it's also going to be abstract. Meaning you can't just have a game object by itself. It has to be something else. Okay. Then in here, we're going to have a public list of type attribute component. And we're just going to call it attributes, because why not? Okay, and it's going to be a property with a get and set, both public, but you don't have to say that. And then afterwards, we're going to initialize it to a new list. So it's initialized to an empty list. If you don't do that, it'll be initialized to null, and you're going to have issues. So that's probably just the easiest way to do it. That means when you create a game object, it'll just go ahead and initialize this attributes property to an empty list, which will help you. Guess what? That's it. We're done. All right, moving on. All right, let's create an actual attribute component. So here we're going to do ability scores. Now, you don't have to start with ability scores if you don't want to. You can do whatever you want. This is your game. But I see most Dungeons and Dragons games that I play, video games that is, they start with the ability scores. And I think that's actually a pretty good way to do it. And it also allows us to introduce some concepts about attribute components before we go completely all out crazy, which we will do. All right. So ability scores. I'm going to create a naming convention here. Anytime I make an attribute class, like something that inherits from attribute component, I'm just going to put attribute in the name of it. So ability score attribute. It's going to be the name. And what's it going to be? Public. As with pretty much everything we're going to be doing today, it's going to be public. Okay. And what's it going to inherit from? Well, that's going to be attribute component, because it's an attribute component. And last but not least, we actually want to mark this abstract again, because we can't have just an ability score attribute. We have to also keep in mind that it could be strength, dexterity, charisma, whatever it is. So we'll create further classes to kind of expand on this idea. All right. So notice that the name is underlined in red. It screams at us. There's no argument given that corresponds to the required formal parameter component name. Well, that's because we required our child classes to pass into the attribute component constructor the name of the component, if you remember. So what you do is you create a constructor for the ability score attribute. And again, we're going to ask for the name because we're still abstract, okay? So we're going to say ability score name. Okay. Then we're going to put a colon and do base, and this will call the base class constructor. So what that'll do, we'll just pass in ability score name, but then we will add a string to that with space, and we'll just say ability score. So basically, we're gonna pass in things like strength or dexterity or charisma, and then we're gonna add the string ability score to it, and that'll be the name of whatever component it is. Yeah. We'll get more into that. Okay, then we're going to create a public int value, get set, and what this is that is our ability score, basically. And we can get and set that from outside the component, because it's public. Okay, so that's all well and good. Now, instead of making different files, I think this is going to be a small enough operation where we can just define all the classes in this file, and we'd be okay. But we definitely could split it into multiple files later if we wanted to. So, we're going to create a public class, and this will be strength score attribute. I spelled it wrong. Strength score attribute. And we're going to inherit from the class we literally just made. Ability score attribute. Okay. But then it's like, ah, crap. We have to pass it in the string. That's literally what the compiler says. It's like, ah, crap. Okay. No parameters for this constructor, but we are going to pass it in the word strength. And that's all. Alright. Now we're going to do the exact same thing, but for the other score attributes. So I think there's 6 of them. By the way, the rulebook, I'll post that in the description, so you can get to the rulebook that way. Okay, so here's a little trick. So we want to change the word strength in all these cases, so we can just do a find replace. So if you do Control H, I believe, yes, and you type in strength in the first box, and then you type in what you want to replace, which is dexterity, and then you go to selection, because I just selected this, and then you do replace all, and it says, hey look, 3 occurrences replaced, and if you look, dexterity, 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 done. Cool. So let's do that again, but instead of dexterity, constitution. Done. What's next? Wisdom? Or it might be intelligence. Actually, I think it's intelligence. If we want to remain in order. It doesn't really matter, but just a little OCD. Then it's wisdom. Alright. And last but not least, charisma. And you're pretty much done there with all the types. Okay, but let's add a utility to this. Ah, crap. Didn't mean to do that. Yeah, I want to add a new function called calculate. Oh, it's a void return type, sorry. Called calculate calculate modifier. Oh, it's not a void return type though. It's an int. I'm sorry. I lied. Okay. So let's look at the Dungeons and Dragons rules. So ability score modifiers. So basically what the modifier is it's a number that's used in particular die rolls. And it's completely dependent on your ability score, which is our value property that we have in there. So if it's 1, it's -5. If it's 2 to 3, it's -4. 4 to 5, it's -3. 6 to 7. Alright, so I notice a little pattern here. That's good. Basically, every 2 numbers, it increments 1. So we can do that by saying value over 2. Okay, and then sorry, I'm listening to music. And it's awesome. Alright, yeah, so 6 to 7. Say we had 6, and then we divide by 2. We get 3. Well, guess what? 3 is not -2, so we need to subtract 5 to get there. Same goes for everything else. So this is the formula for an ability score modifier, if you were ever curious. Quick note, if you're new to programming, this might confuse you a little bit. So 6 over 2 is obviously going to be 3, right? But what about 5 over 2? Well, that's going to... You'd think that would be 2.5. But we're working in integers, right? So we can't have decimal. Alright, fine. Well, maybe it's 3 then. No, wrong. Here's what actually happens when you do integer division. You just chop off the end of the decimal. So even if it's 2.9, you just chop off the end and it becomes 2. So if we look at this, it should check out with our table that we have here. So 12 divided by 2 is 6. And 6 minus 5 is +1. So good. Jolly good. 13 divided by 2. Still 6. According to the rules I just gave you. So it'd still be +1. So we're good. Yay. Alright. So I think we're pretty good there. But what happens if we want to have other attributes, like we'll do in a sec? We'll actually add the age attribute. So other int attributes, it would be helpful if they all shared kind of the same code here. So, well, I'll just show you what I mean. So go ahead and add a class. Alright, and we'll call this integer attribute. You could get all generic on this, but I'm just not going to go there today, okay? Because really all we need for this game is integers and strings, pretty much. But, you know, you're the programmer, so do whatever you feel is necessary, alright? Don't have to do what I'm doing. Exactly. Okay, so integer attribute. For the name, we're just going to do a pass-through. We don't want this guy to do anything with the name of the component. So we'll call it component name. And we'll just pass it straight through to the base constructor. Okay, and the common thing between all integer attributes is the fact that they have a public int called value. Okay. And yeah, I mean, that's really it. You're done. Now go back to the ability score attribute. Instead of inheriting from attribute component, you want to inherit from integer attribute. And now you can get rid of this value thing. See how that works? So that's pretty cool. Oh, except for one thing. This has to be abstract. And public. The integer attribute, that is. Come on, go away. There we go. We good. And get myself some tea. Iced tea. Alright. So, let's look at our rules for kind of what next to do. I know we kind of started with step 3, but I already told you about that. Okay. So, next thing we want to do is actually a pretty large task at hand here. Choose a race. Actually, okay, before we choose a race, let's get this to a state where we can actually make use of all the ability score attributes. I think that would probably help you the most at this point. Alright, so let's go ahead and do that. What I want you to do is go to iResponder. Okay? So if you remember iResponder, this is basically your interface that defines how you are going to communicate with the monogame and the console. Okay? So change background on the console will just put up some text that says the background color changed, whereas on the monogame this function would actually physically change the background color. So we're going to add a new class. It's going to return a game object. Yeah, actually, hold the phone here. Let's actually create a character game object. I know I've said hold the phone like 3 times now, but just bear with me, okay? So we're going to create a class, and this is going to be, we'll call it player character object. Alright, and it will be a game object, and it's going to be public. Okay, we're going to create a constructor, and in this constructor we're just going to add all the attribute components we have. So remember, game object has a list of attributes in the attributes list. So if you do attributes.add and then new add new yeah, whatever ability scores we have. So strength is one of them. New strength score attribute. Done. Now we just do the same thing 6 times for the other attributes. And if you had a character that doesn't have one of these attributes, which I'm not sure why you would, you don't have to include them necessarily. Dexterity. Oh man, my typing sometimes. Constitution. That's a tough word to type. Okay, then we got intelligence, but not if you're intelligent. Then you've got wisdom. And finally, charisma. Just like that. So what this does is on the player character object construction, whenever you create a new player, it'll go ahead and add all those components to it. So pretty straightforward. You'll notice I'm not commenting much. And the reason for that is this code is freaking self-explanatory. And I don't really tend to comment things that are self-explanatory. You know, a lot of programmers might yell at me for that. But also a lot of programmers would totally, like, say amen to that. So if you're coding this, just go ahead and comment it if you want to. Don't comment it if you don't want to. Etc, etc, etc. Rule number 1 for programming is don't like stress about things that don't matter. Okay? Like naming conventions, you only really need to stick to them if there's a reason to. Okay? Just it's a creative art. Just do what you want, get your hands dirty. Whatever. I sound a little bitter right now, but I'm just being kind of super laid back. Okay, so we have a player game object. Now, as I was saying, go back to iResponder. We want to add a function. Actually, it returns a player character object. And it will be called create character. Okay. And that's all. We're going to create a second function too. A void return value and show character information. This is just so we can kind of see some stats so that we know we're doing it right. And we're going to ask for the player character object. I'll just call it player. Okay. Good, jolly good. Now we have to go to the places where iResponder is actually implemented and implement it correctly. So first we'll do monogame responder, just mono responder. And you'll notice that this is red. Well, control period and then enter, and it'll throw in these functions for you with errors here, saying, hey, the programmer hasn't implemented this yet, which is exactly what we want actually, because we're not actually going to do anything with monogame today. We're only going to do things with the console. So go ahead and save. You're going to want to right click on your console project and say set as startup project. So that way we start in console mode, not monogame mode. Unless you want to, you know, have exceptions thrown. I mean, totally up to you, but I ain't about that life. Alright, so console responder, you're going to do the exact same thing you did for mono responder. Just, I clicked up there, then went control period, enter. And hey, we've got our functions, but this time we don't want to throw the errors. So go ahead and delete those. Okay. You'll notice that this function, underlined in red, because we haven't returned a player character object yet, and we need to do that. So what we'll do is we will create a player character object, just call it player, equals new player character object, which again, constructing that, we'll just add all the ability score components to it. And then we'll just subsequently return that player. There's nothing else to do yet. Okay. So in show character information, I guess it's technically the player character information. So actually, I'm going to show you a quick trick. You can actually rename stuff. With Control R, Control R, you can just right click on the name of something. So if you go rename, you can show, yeah, you can just rename it like this and hit apply. And now all the references for this function have changed to that name. Pretty cool, huh? So if you even go to the interface, you'll see it's changed. And if you go to the monoresponder, it's changed. Yep. Okay. So, next thing we want to do is print out all the ability scores. So, the way we'll do this is we'll create a var, which, if you don't know what a var is, it's basically an inferred type. So we can be really lazy and we don't have to know the exact type. So instead of like putting player character object there, we could just say var player. Yeah, we could just replace it. And it'll know what type it's supposed to be. But, you know, just to be explicit there, I'm going to keep it. But here, I don't like to be as explicit because we're going to do something a little weird, which is we're going to ask for the player. Okay, sorry. We're creating a var, and we're going to call it character attribute, or character. I keep forgetting the name of it. Ability scores. Okay, we're going to set that equal to player dot attributes dot type of type, sorry. And in the angle brackets, we will put the type of ability score attribute. Okay. Then put your parentheses and good. So the reason I didn't really want to put the type there is because this is of type enumerable angle bracket ability score attribute, which is kind of like a mouthful. So I didn't really want to type that out. Now what we can do is we can iterate through that. Character ability scores. Oh shit. Sorry. If you do, yeah, for each ability score attribute, ability in character ability scores. Now what you can do is you can console.writeLine and what we'll want to do is probably print out maybe the name of the attribute. So component name. Then we'll add a plus and then a colon space to that string. And then we will add the ability dot value dot to string to convert it to string. Okay, cool. Alright, so last but not least, before we test this out, we need to go to the main game area and actually make it happen. So if it's in Dungeon Crawl Main, and it's called Dungeon Crawl Main. So when we run the program right now, all we do is we change the background color. And now we want to do two extra things. So first we want to create a player character object. And we'll just call player. Set it equal to responder dot create character. Okay. So we'll get the player character from this function. And then what we want to do is responder dot show player character information, and we'll pass it in the player again. Okay, so now when we run this, if all goes according to plan, yeah, we have the background change, and then we see that strength ability score 0, dexterity ability score 0, constitution ability score 0, intelligence, oh, yeah, these are not good scores. Definitely don't want to be in this character's position. So, that's to be expected, though. So, what we'll do is we'll look at the rules. How should we determine ability scores? Alright. Described in Chapter 7, but I think this is enough to really get the hang of it. So, you generate your character's 6 ability scores randomly. Roll 4 6-sided dice and record the total of the highest 3 dice on a piece of scratch paper. Do this 5 more times so that you have 6 numbers. If you want to save time or don't like the idea of randomly determining ability scores, you can use the following scores instead: 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, 8. Okay. Well then. Alright, here's what we'll do. We'll go to ability score attribute, and we'll add a function here called, oh, it's going to be void, and we're going to say randomly roll score. Okay. Now, random number generation. There's a way you do it, and you need a random object to do it. But typically speaking, you only want one random object ever anywhere. So what I'm going to do, really quick, create yet another class. And I'm just going to call the class Global Helper. And this will be kind of our static class for anything, any utilities like this that we need. And I'm just going to create a static random. And why not just call it random? I mean, and we'll just set it equal. We'll only have the getter. No need to set. But we do need a couple things. We need to make this public, and we need to make this public. Okay, so static class just means there's only going to be one instance of the global helper ever, and a static random means there's only going to be one of that ever. Which means the way you access it is a little weird. All you have to do, though, to do it is say, oh, first let's set up our roles. So we're going to create an integer list just called roles. Then we're going to create a loop which starts at 0, loops 4 times, because that's what the rules say to do. If you don't know what for loops are, look them up. I'm not going to spend time explaining this. Okay. So this will execute the code we write here 4 times, and what we'll want to do is add a number to the list each time. So we want to add a random number, right? Between 1 through 6, basically. 6 die. So what we'll do is we'll say global helper dot random. This is the static access way to go about things. And you just say dot next. And what you do is you say, okay, min value is 1, max value is 6. Done. Okay, so that will roll 4 die. Cool beans. Alright, now we throw away the smallest one. So what do? Well, you can say rolls.remove, and then you can say rolls.min. Okay. Now we have to sum up the remaining. So we just create int sum equals 0. And then for each int n in rolls, sum plus equals n. And that will add up all of the rolls. Pretty simple. Then all we have to do is say value, which remember is our integer attribute thing, equals sum. And that's what the Dungeons and Dragons rules says we do. Which I think is a pretty fair way to do it. Okay, so go ahead and save all. Now go back to console responder. This is where we're gonna actually tell it to do the rolls. So we're gonna say actually we're gonna do a lot like this here. So I'm gonna actually just copy paste that code. So character ability scores equals player attributes of type. Then we iterate through that list, except instead of writing a line, I want to do something different. I want to just randomly roll score. And that's all. So let's run it. Alright, strength ability score 9, dexterity 12, constitution 11, intelligence 11, wisdom 11, charisma 9. So that's not a great roll, but hey, it's a roll nonetheless. Okay, so I noticed that we have the ability scores, but we don't really have the modifiers showing. So I'm actually going to go in the show player character information function. I'm just going to add a little bit so that we can see the modifiers as well. So what we do is we create an int, and we'll just say it's called modifier equals ability dot calculate modifier. Okay. And then after the last thing, I'm going to start a new line here. So clean line. We want to add a space and a left parenthesis. And then we want to add again. This time I'm going to put a little Boolean expression in here. So if modifier is above 0, then we want to, it's a question mark. Then we want to put a plus in front of it, because it does do that automatically. Otherwise, we don't want to put anything in front of it, because the minus will take care of itself. Okay. And then we add again. This time we add the modifier to string. Then we add again. This time we add a right parenthesis. And that will be all. Okay, so if you don't understand this code, don't worry about too much. You can get rid of this and it would be fine. But I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Just look into it, I guess. Google it. Or ask me. Okay, so now we can see 10 with 0 modifier, 7 with -2, 12 with +1, 10 with 0, 9 with -1. Okay, let's compare this to our chart. So if we... Here's our chart. Get this a little closer. Okay, so 10 should be 0. Correct. 7 should be -2. Correct. 9 should be -1. Yeah. Pretty much all checked out. Cool. Alright. So yay. We've got the ability scores and modifiers all done. Alright, let's take it to the next level. So, I'm going to scroll down to the supposed first step in character creation, which is race. Alright, so this is actually a really helpful sort of list on the right. That basically says, hey, programmer, here's all the attribute components you need. So, ability score increase, let's just keep that in the ability score attribute we already have. That's how we'll implement that. Age, we do need a new component for that. So let's go ahead and add that. So right click on the Dungeon Crawl main, add class. This will be called age attribute. Okay, it is public. And what is it? It's an integer attribute. Okay, so the only thing we have to do to implement this, very easy. We just give it the name, which is just age. Done. Done, done, done. So yeah, it's really that easy. Alright, next one. Hit me. Alignment. Ooh. Fun one. Alright. Add class. Alignment attribute. Okay, this one isn't an integer attribute. It's, let's just make it straight up attribute component, because alignment's kind of hard to represent. So public, and it's complaining at us because we don't have a name for it. So let's just feed in the text alignment to the base constructor, and we'll just leave it at that. Alright, so if you're unfamiliar with Dungeons and Dragons alignments, it's basically you have two axes. There's one which represents morality. So it's either good, neutral, or evil. It's very absolute in Dungeons and Dragons. And so that's pretty easy to understand. But the other aspect of alignment is sort of, I guess the best way to describe it would be how you behave in social circumstances. So there's there's lawful, there's neutral, and there's chaotic. So chaotic is more like you reject the norm. You're like the Han Solo, and neutral is neutral, obviously, and then lawful is like you abide by some sort of code, some sort of social code, and you like order rather than anarchy, pretty much. And what you do with these alignments is you basically combine them together. So that creates 9 possible alignments. You can be lawful good, you can be lawful neutral, you can be lawful evil, neutral good, true neutral is the name for the middle one, and of course neutral evil, and you get the idea. Chaotic with the rest of them. Okay, so we'll just create a public enum for this, and it will be called morality alignment. And the 3 morality ones, like I said, are good, neutral, and evil. Okay, create another enum for social alignment. So this is lawful, neutral, and chaotic. Alright, now all we have to do to store this in our attribute is create public accessors to them. So morality, we'll just call it morality. Get set. Public social alignment. Social. Get set. Alright. So just like that. We're done. Yep. Alright, even if you're new to programming, once you get to this part, you can just pretty much do anything you want once you understand most of this. Okay, so size. Let's create an attribute for size. Size attribute, which is in this case, let's do it a good old attribute component again. Make sure it's public, and create the constructor, which just feeds in size as a string to the base constructor. Bam. Okay, now what we need is a public enum called size, lo and behold, and we create all the different sizes, which actually I don't have off the top of my head. So let's say Dungeons and Dragons size chart. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll dock these side by side. Alright, so fine, which is like 6 inches or less. Jesus Christ, that's pretty small. Diminutive? I've never seen those sizes ever. I've seen tiny a few times. I think, yeah, tiny is like 2.5 feet big. Okay, small, this is like the halfling size. Medium is the size of most characters. Large is like, I think like ogres. I don't know, anywhere from 500 pounds to 2 tons. Okay, we got huge, which is like 2 to 16 tons. Holy crap, that's big. Gargantuan. Definitely wouldn't want to fight a monster Gargantuan. There's Colossal. And then it looks like there's Colossal Plus, which, if you look at that one, that's 125 tons or more and takes up 30 feet of space. Holy crap. Okay. Yeah, no, that's ridiculous. Alright. I love how they define the rules for how likely you are able to hide. Like, this basically subtracts 16 to your dice roll when you make a hide check. At this point, they should just say impossible to hide, because you're just that big. Okay. So next thing up, we've got speed. Let's get our solution explorer back. Oh, wait. We've got to create this size. I'm just being a little... Okay, public size... just call it size. Get set. If you're worried about name collision, don't be. It's okay. In this case. Okay. Okay, now we'll add speed. Speed attribute. Bam. Which is of type integer. Counts in feet, which is annoying. I would much rather live in a world that is metric. But maybe I'm just being hipster and un-American. Oh, abstract, no. I meant public. Oh, yeah. And then you have to create the constructor. Derp. And just feed it the name. Speed. And since we're inheriting from an integer attribute, we're done. That's all we have to do. Okay. Next up. Languages. Alright, I'm going to do something a little different for this one. First, before we make that, I'm going to create a class for string attributes, which is just like an integer attribute, except it's a string. Make sure it's public and abstract. Okay, add a public string of value. Get set. Okay, and then implement the constructor. And we're going to ask for the name. Passed in. Just to pass through there. And done. Alright, now add the class for language. Language attribute. So we're going to implement this one as a string attribute. The reason I'm doing that is because I don't think it's very important for the game. But it might be cool to list it at some point if we want to. So this is going to be a string attribute. Alright, and make sure this is public. Okay, implement the constructor, just per usual. Base is going to be language. And done. Now, the reason language attribute is going to be different, other than using a string attribute, is if we want to add multiple languages, what we're going to do is we're just going to add this component multiple times, but with different strings. Yeah, I mean that's all there is to it. We'll get to that in a bit. So you will see. Okay, cool. And subraces, we'll take care of that later. Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to create races. So what we'll do is, you guessed it, create a race attribute. Okay. This one is just going to be a straight up attribute component. It's going to be public. But since we're going to have multiple races that inherit from this, we're going to mark it abstract. Alright. In the constructor, we will actually ask for the race name. And then in the base, we will say the race name, but then we'll add space race. Okay. Now let's go ahead and implement all these races. So first off, we have sub-races here. So a dwarf can be a hill dwarf or mountain dwarf. Alright. So public abstract class. Yes, a dwarf is abstract. Dwarf attribute, ugh. Which is a race attribute. And for this constructor, I think we'll just do another pass-through. We won't add anything to it. You can do this however you want, but I'm just going to do pass-through for this. Okay. Then I'm going to implement the two different types of dwarfs. So this is no longer abstract. So there's a, what was it? Yeah, hill dwarf, mountain dwarf. So hill dwarf is the first one, which is a dwarf attribute. We're going to keep to our attribute naming convention. Okay. So in this constructor, we're going to ask for nothing and just say hill dwarf. Okay. Now we're going to implement the mountain dwarf. Mountain dwarf attribute. Dwarf attribute. And in this constructor, we will pass it mountain dwarf. Yeah, don't need to do anything in here. Okay. Moving on. Elves. Abstract class elf. Attribute. Elf attribute. Which is a race attribute. Just like the dwarf attribute, we're going to pass through. Done. Okay, what types of elves do we have? That's a good question. We have high elf and we have wood elf. High elf attribute, which is an elf attribute. Public high elf attribute. Pass it in as high elf. Done. Next, public class wood elf attribute. Elf attribute. Public wood elf attribute. Base wood elf. Done. Next, just chugging along here. All right, public class, abstract class, halfling attribute. Halfling attribute, not, doesn't inherit from itself. Silly me. Race attribute is what it inherits from, and just like the other ones, we'll do a pass through for this. String race name. Race name. Yep. Just like that. Public class. What halflings do we have? Lightfoot and stout. By now, this should be pretty automatic to you. Alright, stout. I called it halving. Okay, and last but not least, humans. Now, they didn't want to be racist when they created the Dungeons and Dragons rules, so if you look under sub-races, well, actually there is no category for sub-races. Because I guess they didn't want to be like, oh hey, Asians are bad at driving, or whatever it is. So they didn't want it to have any sort of real world. I'm not saying that. Oh god, that sounds racist. Okay, I'm not racist, just FYI. That's just something people say, that Asians are bad at driving. But if you look at, okay, what I'm trying to say is, if you look at all these ethnicities, like, they don't have any special abilities for any of them, so that therefore there's not really a point to programming any of this in. You can go for that if you want to. You can go super in depth here. You can add all the ethnicities and all their names and like their descriptions and whatever you want to do, but we're not going to go there, okay? Or at least I'm not going to go there. Okay. So, we're just gonna have just a straight up human. And that's a race attribute. Public human. Oh, that sounded so bad. Jeez. Okay, yeah, we're just passing a human to the base. Done. Cool. So that's all the races. Pretty much done there. Okay, so one thing we want to do is we want to help the character process along. So you'll see that all of the races have certain benefits and certain traits that kind of help that race out a bit. So here, so we'll start with Dwarf. In fact, Dwarf is all we're going to get to today. All right, because this has already been going on long enough. Pretty much getting multiple videos in one video. Alright, so Dwarf traits. Ability score increase. Your constitution score increases by 2. Alright, so let's do that. So what we want to do is, for the race attribute, we want to add a function that's public and void. And it'll just be called adjust, I guess, adjust race bonus. I'm trying to think of a good name. Hold on. I don't know. We'll just say adjust racial traits. And then we'll put a comment that kind of says more about what it does in a sec. Yeah, this is the perfect time for a comment, by the way. When you're kind of struggling to come up with a name with stuff, that is a good indicator that you need a comment. Okay, and we're going to ask for a game object. Which I guess we'll just call character. Why not? Okay, but the thing is, we want to mark this function as abstract, so that all these other, see, it just caused an error for pretty much all these. That's because now they need to implement this, just like the interface thing we had going elsewhere. So let's add a comment here with the // and that's a good way to add comments. I'll show you why in a sec. But so this will add bonuses to the character given based on racial traits. I guess this will add bonuses and make adjustments to the character given based on racial traits. Cool. I think that's a good explanation. All right, and then there's this thing, param name equals character. So if you type in here, what that's basically doing is it's giving us documentation on the parameter. So we can do that as well. So the character to make adjustments to. Alright, so now anywhere in the code, if we just mouse over this, you'll see that IntelliSense automatically pops up with that documentation, which is pretty nice, slick. And furthermore, while we're typing that function out, it'll even come up with the parameter thing while we're typing in the character. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. Cool beans. So, what we will want to do is implement this for the door, for starters. So, the way you do that is you do override, adjust racial traits, and bam, just does that for you. Alright, but we want to do something special for the dwarf attribute. And that is, we want to add a protected abstract void that is exactly like that function that we just made. So it's called adjust racial traits, but then we're just going to add an impl at the end. And this is a pretty common software pattern. And it's going to be like the exact same, except we'll have control over when we call it in here. So we're going to go ahead and copy this code, the adjust racial traits and adjust racial traits impl, because that code's going to be pretty much the same for all the attributes like elves in general or halflings in general. So yeah, we're going to copy it to the elf attribute like so. Then we're going to go to the halfling attribute, the same thing. Human attribute, we're going to do that, but then we're going to erase the impl thing because we don't need that. Okay. So now these are complaining because we haven't implemented the impl function. So what we're going to do is do that. Override just racial traits impl. Okay, I'm going to copy that code from the hill dwarf to the mountain dwarf, and from the mountain dwarf to the high elf, and from the high elf to the wood elf, from the wood elf to the lightfoot, from the lightfoot to the stout. Alright. Save. Now, today we're just going to implement the hill dwarf and the mountain dwarf. So to do that, we first have to determine what bonuses do dwarves in general get. So bonuses that the hill and mountain dwarf both kind of share there. So first we're going to erase this error, okay? And we're going to look at the rules. So first thing is constitution score increases by 2. Okay. So here's what we're going to do to get the constitution. We can say character dot attributes dot of type, and that type is constitution score attribute, and parentheses dot first. What that'll do is that'll grab the first constitution score attribute that we've added to this character. I don't know why there would be multiple. There's no reason for there to be multiple constitution score attributes unless there was like some sort of bug or something. But yeah, generally you'd have just one. Now, disclaimer here, this will throw an exception if it doesn't have a constitution score attribute. Yeah, you're going to have issues there. But, you know, I'm kind of fairly certain if I'm in this code, we're good. Pretty much. So I'm just not going to really bother. But if you want to be a good programmer, you can go ahead and try catch this statement and, you know, do the right thing. But it just kind of bloats the code quite a bit, so I'm just going to kind of avoid it. Alright. So this will return us the constitution store attribute. So at the beginning of this, I'm just going to say constitution equals that. There we go. And now what we can do if we want to add, what was it, 2? Yes, 2. All we have to do is say constitution dot value plus equals 2. That will add 2 to it. Okay, done. What's our next one? Age. Alright, this isn't really that specific to dwarves, so I'm going to leave that out of this function. Alignment, same thing there. Size, though, that's medium for all dwarves, so we definitely want to do something with that. So what we'll do is we'll add, actually no, every character has a size. Sorry, erase that. We'll do size attribute. Size equals character attributes of type. And size attribute first. Alright. Then we just do size dot size equals size dot, and medium is the correct one for dwarves according to the rules. Speed. Okay, for dwarves it's 25. Oh, not reduced by wearing heavy armor though. We're gonna have to think of something to do there. Okay, so speed, every character has a speed component as well, so we're going to do the exact same thing. Speed equals character dot attributes dot type. Speed first. Speed dot value equals 25. Alright. Now, the other thing we have to do. By the way, if you're in the code right now, these would throw exceptions. And the reason that is because we haven't added the size or the speed attribute to the player yet. But we will get around to that before we're done. Okay, we need to add sort of a way to program that a dwarf speed is not reduced by wearing heavy armor. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new component, which will essentially be a blank component. But it's just going to say I guess I don't know. We'll call it Dwarven heavy armor speed reduction attribute. That's kind of a verbose name, but I mean, it's kind of hard to explain. So, okay, it is an attribute component. It's public. We need to give it a constructor. So it's more like a lack of speed reduction, but that's okay. If you think of a better name, by all means, go for it. But this is kind of a confusing one. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy and paste the rules as the description. And that way, when I come back to this, to actually go and implement that into like combat rules, I'll know what it is, which will be helpful. Okay. Next thing up, dark vision. All right, so that's something that should also be added to every character. Basically, how many feet can you see in the darkness? So, dark vision attribute. Which is an attribute component. Actually, no, it's an integer component. And of course, public. Okay, and we create a constructor. And we just pass it in. String dark vision distance. And that's all. Done. Okay. Let's go back to the race stuff. Race attribute. Okay, so we need to add the Dwarven heavy armor speed reduction attribute. God, that's such a mouthful. So character dot attributes dot add and new Dwarven blah blah blah. Dwarven blah, blah, blah. Okay, then we'll do character dot attributes dot add. Oh wait, no, we're not. Every character has dark vision. Sorry. Lied. Vision equals character dot attributes dot type. And dark vision attribute dot first vision dot value equals, what was it? 60 feet. We're not going to worry about the shades of gray thing. Okay. Dwarven resilience. Have an advantage on saving throws against poison and your resistance against poison damage. Alright, so we're going to do something similar to the Dwarven heavy armor speed reduction attribute. Because we're really not sure how those rules are going to pan out yet. Dwarven resilience is the name of this. Dwarven resilience attribute. Okay. Then what we do is we inherit from attribute component. Say public. And we give it a name. Cool beans. Alright. Now this is another weird one, so I'm going to add a comment for the class with the documentation. Just like that. Cool. Okay, now we need to add that to the race again. So back to the race. Yeah, so this one we'll do another character dot attributes dot add new Dwarven resilience attributes. Because that's actually new. That's not an adjustment, that's an actual new component that we're adding. Because he's a dwarf. Okay, Dwarven combat training. Alright, instead of adding something like Dwarven resilience, the other thing. What I'm going to do for this, like, this is a much more common problem. So we need a way to say that we are proficient in this, we are proficient in that, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a class for weapon proficiency, call attribute. Done. That's going to be attribute component public as a constructor. Give it a name. Weapon proficiency. Done. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to create an enum above the class. Public enum weapon type. This is just what we'll do for now. We could do something more crazy like we did for the races. But honestly don't really need that. I don't see a point as of right now. But we could certainly do that in the future if we need to. So for weapon types, I'm not going to list all of them out yet. I'm just going to pretty much take the ones on an on-need basis. So we've got the battle axe, we've got the hand axe, we've got the light hammer, and we've got the war hammer. Although I feel like light hammer should have a capital H and war hammer should have a lowercase h. I don't know why I feel like that. I don't know. But yeah, there's our weapon types. We'll add more later. Yeah, and then the last thing you need to do is you just need to create a public weapon type. I'll just call it weapon. And get set. And you're done for that. Okay, what next? Race attribute. So, now we need to add those proficiencies. So the way we'll do that is we'll add multiple of those weapon proficiency components. So we'll do weapon proficiency attribute. But here we need to change the data in that. So you can do that with curly braces. It's just a more concise way of doing it. And we'll say weapon equals weapon type dot battle axe for this one, for the semicolon. Now, if you're new to programming or you've just never seen this before, this is equivalent to if I were to do this. So weapon proficiency attribute weapon equals new attribute, and then saying weapon dot weapon equals weapon type dot battle axe, and then finally doing the character attributes add and weapon. So all this equivalent code to this, but you know, which would you rather type? Obviously the first one. So in fact, this makes it really easy for us to just do this. You have 4 things, right? So we just need to change the one for each. Done. Just like that. Okay, what's next? Tool proficiency. You gain proficiency with the artisan's tools of your choice. Okay, I'm gonna veto this one for this game. But if you want to go that in depth, by all means, go for it. Stone cutting. Whenever you make an intelligence history check related to the origin of stonework, you are considered proficient in the history skill, and add double your proficiency bonus to the check instead of your normal proficiency bonus. Yeah, I'm kind of on the same lines with that one as with tool proficiency. I think that's a little too in depth because what are the chances I'm going to have something about stonework in this game? Pretty much nada. Okay, languages. We actually already created an attribute for that, so that'll be really easy. You can speak, read, and write Common and Dwarvish. Okay, so we'll just add 2 language attributes then. That's pretty easy. Add new language attribute. Do the same thing we did with the weapon for proficiency. Except value equals common. And do the same thing for Dwarvish. Yeah, there we go. Equals Dwarvish. And done. Alright, so that's all for the dwarf traits, the general dwarf traits. So next thing we want to do is concentrate on the hill dwarf and mountain dwarf. So we created this adjust racial traits impl. So we're just going to call it now. Alright, and that will pop on over to here. Or here, depending on which class it is. Okay, so adjust racial trait symbol. So for the hill dwarf, we want an ability score increase, another one I guess, for wisdom. Cool. So to do that, well, we create a well, we don't create one, but there's a wisdom score attribute, which equals character dot attributes dot of type wisdom first. That'll give us our first wisdom attribute. Then what we can do is we can go ahead and go, hey, wisdom value plus equals 1. Or just plus plus, that works. Okay. Next up, Dwarven Toughness. Your hit point maximum increases by 1 and it increases by 1 every time you gain a level. Ooh. Okay, so for that one, I'm going to add another one of those kind of empty attributes. Because that's kind of a tough rule. Alright, and this will be just an attribute component, just like the rest of them. Public. And just give it a name. Okay, pass it in Dwarven Toughness. Okay, and last but not least, this is a weird one, so we want to add a comment. If you think this is long, keep in mind I literally just did all of this before this video. Okay. Increase it by 1 and increase it by 1 every time you gain a level. Perfect. Awesome. Superb. So now we just add it to the race. So you just say character dot attributes dot add. And new was it toughness or resilience? Sound the same. Yeah, it was toughness. I have a memory of a goldfish right now. Okay, so that's it for Hildorf. Now for Mountaindorf. So ability score increase, strength by 2. Strength score attribute. Strength. Character. Dot attributes. Dot type. Strength. First. Strength dot value. Plus equals 2. Increasing it by 2. Next, Dwarven armor training. You have proficiency with light and medium armor. Okay, so now we need to add armor proficiency. So add a new class. Okay, armor proficiency attribute. Okay, this will be just another attribute component. Be public. Okay, then we need to give it some sort of thing. Some sort of name. And what will be called armor proficiency. And this will work exactly like the weapon proficiency. So what we need is a public enum for now. And it'll be armor proficiency. Wait, no, just armor type. Armor type is good. And I don't know if this covers all of the types, but if we need more, we can add them later. So light, medium, heavy. Okay, cool. Then we can just do public armor type. Call armor. And with the get set. That's all. Save. Alright, back to our race. So now we need to add light and medium armor. Cool. So you just do this. Character dot attributes dot add new armor proficiency attribute with the curly braces thing going on. Say armor equals armor type dot light. And copy paste that for line 2. Except instead of light, we want medium. And all is good. Save everything. Alright. So we're going to stop there for the races. One last thing I want to do before I close is prove to you that all this stuff works in some way. So maybe what we'll do... Oh, so go to the player character object. So far we've only added the ability scores, but there's other traits that all players have that we need to add as well. So I'm actually going to section this off with a comment saying ability scores. Alright. Then I'll create maybe racial traits. And I'll just kind of use section as a reference. Racial traits. So age is 1. Attributes.add new age attribute. Attributes.add new, what's the next one? Alignment attribute. Attributes.add new, what's the next one? Size attribute. And next one, new speed. And languages, we're going to add component to component. so we don't have to worry about that. So we'll just, like I did earlier, just add a language component for common if you speak common. Okay, that's it for the racial traits, but I know there's some other things that we need to do, like dark vision is one. So I'm just gonna add that here as well. Dark vision attribute. Because all players need some sort of information about how far they can see in the dark. Okay, just going through these, just checking everything. Yeah, that's only added if they're dwarves. Language, added on a per need basis. Well, obviously they need a race attribute, but we don't know of what type, so we're going to defer that to the character creation process. Size we got, speed we got. Yeah, we pretty much got everything we need here. So, cool. Alright, now go to the console responder. And let's actually make a race. Okay. So we'll modify this in the future so that you can do things like re-roll ability scores and whatnot. But this is mostly just testing stuff right now. So what we'll want to do is we're going to want to add a new race component. So we'll create a race attribute. We'll just call it race equals new. And here's where we want to input the type of it. So personally, I would never choose Hilldorf. I need to choose Mountaindorf. I don't know why anybody would choose Hilldorf. Because, I mean, +2 strength or, like, +1 wisdom. Like, come on. Yeah. Anyways. So, we created a new race. Let's go ahead and add the race to player attributes. Then what we'll do is we'll say race dot adjust racial traits on the player. And that will go ahead and adjust all everything, which is awesome. Okay, so that's cool. We do all that stuff under the hood, but it would be nice if we had some way to at least maybe see what components we have added, just so we can kind of guess that the data's right and all that. So maybe what we'll do is we'll just say for each attribute component in player dot attributes console dot write line, and we'll just print out all the names of the components. That's pretty simple and straightforward. So if we do this, we should get all the components that we'd expect to see for a dwarf, Mountaindorf. So expand this. This is kind of getting big. Okay, so background color change. Then we got our ability scores. And yeah, and then it immediately starts listing all the components after this one. So it lists the names of the scores again, which is kind of funny. But that is what we asked it to do. Then it lists age, alignment, size, speed, dark vision distance. Those are all things that everyone should have. Mountaindorf race. Perfect. So we are indeed at Mountaindorf. We have Dwarven heavy armor speed reduction, which is that thing all dwarves get. Dwarven resilience, another thing all dwarves get. 4 weapon proficiencies, which we know if we were to look at the data for those, it would be the battle axe, the whatever was listed there, you know. And common Dwarvish, 2 armor proficiencies, as we would expect from a Mountain Dwarf. So pretty much, yeah, it worked, and it worked well. And yeah, that is all for this video. I hope you enjoyed marathoning with me. I feel like a kind of Bob Ross here with a happy little code. Anyways, like if you like, subscribe if you want more. Come check out our game on Steam, Greenlight, Anvil Assault, Atomic Alien Annihilation, and I'll see you next week, hopefully. Alright, goodbye.